Welcome friends. Now let's look at the Paris climate deal at a glance. Okay, so these are the important points which will be relevant from both mains and the prelims point of view, which I am going to discuss. So the first point is that the Paris climate deal, the countries have agreed a long-term goal to limit the global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible above pre-industrial levels. So agreement aims to limit the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. Okay, so it also aims to pursue the effort to limit the temperature if possible to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. That is the limit, because 2 degrees Celsius we may witness undesirable catastrophic consequences. So it is better to limit the rise in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. Okay, that is the first important point. Second is that national pledges to cut greenhouse gas emission in the year 2020. So during the Paris climate deal and its negotiation, countries have made intended nationally determined contributions. So this intended nationally determined contributions, these are the voluntary pledges. These are voluntary, not forced by any developed countries or any agency. These are voluntary for those countries. These are the pledges setting out how the plan to those countries plan to limit their greenhouse gas emission during 2020. Okay, so individual countries submits intended nationally determined contributions, that is voluntary pledges, and how they plan to limit their greenhouse gas emission during 2020s and after to UNFCCC. So some 158 submissions covering 185 countries have made to UNFCCC, because European Union submits one pledge for all the member countries, all the 28 member countries. So this covers more than 90% of the global emissions. The proposed deal commits countries to pursue domestic mitigation measures with the aim of achieving the objectives. So here, the most important thing is that the target which are set by the countries themselves as part of intended national determined contribution is not legally binding. Okay, it is not legally binding. A country will not be penalized if it fails to meet this target. Please remember, this is very important. Okay, this outcome of Paris climate deal is not legally binding, and there is no penalty for the failure to meet the targets. So intended nationally determined contribution will become nationally determined contribution at the time of each country ratifies the Paris Agreement. When the country ratifies the agreement, that the plan will become the country's target. Okay, so European Union has agreed to reduce the greenhouse gas emission to 40% below 1990 level by 2030. That is their intended nationally determined contribution. That is their voluntary pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Okay, that will become the target for European Union after 2020 as part of the Paris climate deal. Okay, so if the European Union fails to meet the target, that will not be penalized. That is the crux of the issue. That will hold for all the countries as well. Okay, so third point is that a plan to make countries pledge deeper emission cuts in future is there, improving their plans every 5 years. So this is not static, and countries have to revise their plans, voluntary pledges every 5 years, starting from 2023. After that 2028, after that 2033, likewise. So non-binding decision text asks countries to come back before 2020 and to revisit the pledges they have made, and to then make new pledges every 5 years thereafter. Okay, so binding deal covering the period after 2020 also commit countries to communicate a nationally determined contribution every 5 years. So each country pledge must represent a progression on their previous one and reflect its highest position ambition. That is the deeper emission cut, the plan to make deeper emission cut from the countries in the future, which will be revised every 5 years. That is the third important highlight. And the efforts to mitigation, it binds the parties to prepare and regularly update climate commitments. So each subsequent pledge that the countries make on their own to reduce the global warming must be more ambitious, and developing countries are encouraged to move towards stricter goals, because developing countries are not legally binding previously. So they are also encouraged, not forced, encouraged, because this is voluntary. So countries would be required to pursue policies with the aim of achieving their climate pledges, voluntary pledges, a tougher than expected provision. The decision text invites countries to write long-term low-emission strategies by 2020, while the legal agreements say they should strive to do this. Okay, that is the third point. The fourth is that related to the funding by developed countries to developing countries to develop the green climate economies. Okay, so rich nations, that is developed countries, to provide funding to the poorer countries as part of the obligation of common but differentiated responsibility, mobilizing $100 billion a year until 2025, and after that more than that. So agreement requires the developed nations as defined by United Nations Framework Convention in 1992. This will continue to help developing countries with the cost of going green and cost of coping with effects of climate change. So this monetary commitment is also not legally binding. This is one of the drawbacks. It is not legally binding on the developed countries to fund the developing countries. It is a moral obligation only. Currently, developed countries are obliged to mobilize $100 billion a year of public and private finance to help developing countries by the year 2020. So it is a target set in Copenhagen 2009. So if you have not watched that, please watch the video which was made on the Copenhagen Accord. So Paris decision, this decision, here developed countries continue $100 billion a year target for funding the climate projects in developing countries, and after 2025 they will set a new goal from a floor of $100 billion. They may set 150, 180, but they should not set the target below $100 billion after 2025. That is the agreement. Okay. So next is progress monitoring and accountability. So this is important here. There is a global stock take on the pledges in 2023 and every 5 years thereafter. Okay, so to assess the progress towards the aim of the agreement and to encourage the countries to make deeper pledges. So countries will have to disclose an inventory of their emissions from their own countries and information to track their progress in hitting their national target. So this will be subjected to a technical expert review to check their progress and highlights area where improvement is needed. However, the whole transparency framework will have built-in flexibility, offering leeway to developing countries that need it in the light of their capabilities. Okay, that is here. This is not an external agency which monitors and makes accountable the countries. So every country must provide their data every 5 years, and they make the pledges more severely every 5 years from 2023 onwards. Okay, so this is infographic explains the Paris climate deal. So after 2023, okay, after 2023, every 5 years, the countries must make the more stricter pledges to reduce the global warming and climate change. So short-term action until 2020 is also announced. So emission pre-2020 mitigation efforts, enhanced pre-emission 2020 mitigation efforts, start long-term phase out of coal, oil and gas in a just transition, feed-in tariff and priority assess for renewable energy, zero deforestation. These are the targets till 2020. Okay, so these are the issues related to Paris climate deal. So those are the issues, those are the important highlights of the Paris climate deal.